Daughters of Change, Episode 2. Focus on service and not fear when starting something new. With Daughter of Change, Jody Flynn, who's made it her personal mission to listen for, bring out, and nurture other people's strengths so they can use them to their advantage. Hi, everybody. I want you to meet today's Daughter of Change, Jody Flynn of Women Taking the Lead. Today, Jody is going to be talking about the focus on service and not fear when starting something new. So you're in for quite a treat. So before I introduce Jody, let me tell you a little bit about her. Jody Flynn of Women Taking the Lead is an executive leadership coach, podcaster, author, speaker, workshop facilitator, and community leader for ambitious, hardworking women who want to be successful without sacrificing their health or their happiness. Jody specifically works with women who are rock star performers at work but are at risk for burnout. She's the host of the critically acclaimed Women Taking the Lead podcast and is an Amazon best-selling author with her book, Accomplished: How to Go from Dreaming to Doing. Jody also serves as vice president on the board for the Maine Women's Conference. You can find out more about Jody at womentakingthelead.com. And we'll make sure to give you more ways to get in touch with Jody later on in the podcast. But for right now, I want to introduce you to Jody. As you can tell, she has a vast amount of accomplishments behind her, which my guess is would make her a type A woman, right, Jody?
I am.
So who to know better? So, Jody, I'd like for people to get to know you a little bit better by, why don't you tell us a little bit about your story and how you got from the golden handcuffs to where you are now?
Yes, Marie, thank you so much for inviting me on. It is an honor to be one of the first guests on your new podcast, which is exciting. And thank you to those of you who are listening and found this podcast. Marie and I are both the type of people where we want to provide a lot of value and make sure you enjoy yourself along the way. So that being said, yes, it's always funny to hear my bio read back at me because it's all true. Like, let me just say that. All of those things are true, but it's such a two-dimensional picture of a human being, and it never captures, like, what it took to get there. So let me even go back even further before the golden handcuffs and say you would not recognize me as a child because I was not this way. I would never have been like, yeah, you grab a microphone, I'll grab a microphone, we'll hop on the computer, we'll have a conversation, and we'll put it out to the entire world. That sounds like fun. Never, 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 never would that have happened because I was painfully shy growing up and I didn't believe in myself. I was very doubtful of who I was and what I had to offer. I mean, we all go through those teen angst years, but it was even more dramatic than that. Like, I was afraid to speak up because I was afraid I would do or say something awkward. And I didn't want to draw any attention to myself. So I held myself back in a lot of areas of my life. So let's just give you the 10,000 foot version of I had a lot of experiences, people who came into my life, books that came into my life, movies, conversations that just helped me to see myself differently so that I could see that I did have a lot of value to provide, that there were things that I could say that nobody else was going to say, or they didn't have my perspective. And so it was important for me to speak up. And again, then I just got my certification in coaching. I had my career experiences, which had highs and lows, but were always learning experiences. And just one by one, eventually identified, what do I want to accomplish? What do I want to get done? And did those things one at a time. When you read my bio, those are things that happened over years, many years. They didn't all happen like within a year or two. And so, yes, I have accomplished a lot, but I'm almost midway through my life too, and I have a lot more to accomplish, and I know I'm going to get even more done in the second half of my life because
Absolutely.
I'm no longer faced with this uncertainty of who I am and what I want to bring to the world.
So how did you get there, Jody? What was that? That's quite a journey, but to go from being a shy young woman who was not confident to this woman that you are today, and to go from working for others to taking this leap into the chasm of risk in the unknown to start Women Taking the Lead. So talk a little bit about that.
Yes, I'll bottom line it, because there were a lot of different experiences and touch points that helped me ultimately achieve this goal and continue to do so. I changed the way I looked at myself and the way I looked at the world. I stopped being so afraid to speak up, right? It was one of those things where if you come from a place where you're just absorbed with fear, right? And thinking about like, oh my God, if I say this, I'll hurt people's feelings. Or if I say this, they'll yell at me. Or if I say this, they'll laugh. Or if I say this, they'll slap me down. I stopped getting all caught up in that, because those are the thoughts that will hold you back. And I started focusing on, why do I need to do this? Why do I need to speak up? Why does this need to be said? And I came to realize that you can do things even though you feel fear, right? Fear doesn't have to stop you.
It doesn't have to stop you. So would you say that every time you move past something that makes you hesitant or scared, the next time it's easier?
It does get easier. And I don't want to deceive people. It's not like the fear or the discomfort completely goes away.
Right.
Like there's always, but it's how you translate the experience too, because there are some times where I'm having a physical experience as I'm about to do something really awesome that would be the same physical experience I would be having as if I was on a roller coaster. Right? Like fear of heights, the fear of the drop, like your body getting like whipped around in all different directions. Our bodies have the same physical response to excitement as we have to fear. Right? So it's all about, like, I'm going to really underscore this over and over and over again. It's how you look at things and how you interpret them and what you make them mean. Because there's some, like I said, there's sometimes when I feel like, oh my God, I feel like I'm having a panic attack, but I'm about to speak and share and try to make a difference for people in their life. I'm about to do a presentation and it's going to be awesome, but I could at the same time say to myself, I'm so afraid I can't do this. Right. But instead I say, oh my God, this is so important. I'm so excited.
So that's why we're saying focus on the service, not the fear when you're starting or jumping into something new. So that was actually when you were talking about, you're about to impart, you're going to have a speaking engagement or a workshop, and you know that you're imparting very important information that can be helpful to people. Is that what you mean when you say focus on the service, not the fear? And can you talk a little more about that and maybe offer some advice to people as to how do they do that?
Yes, it's very simple, but this was something I had an aha moment in my business one day. When, it was just one of those days where you wake up feeling the burden of it all. You're just oh my God, there's so much work to do and I don't enjoy this kind of work that I'm doing. I love my business, but let's face it, there are components of my business, or if you're in, an organization, there are components of your job. Even if you love your job, there are pieces of it that you may not love or may not be your strengths. And I was just so self-focused. Like in retrospect, this is what was happening. It was all about me and having to do this work, how it was impacting me and making me miserable. And all of a sudden, like I just had this thought, and I think I was preparing a presentation for a group of women. And I suddenly thought of the women that were going to be in the room. And I thought about the difference this presentation was going to make for them, because I'm all about helping people to change their perspective so that what's causing them stress right now is gone. And this is exactly what was happening. right? And so when I thought about those women and the difference it was going to make for them, like all of a sudden, it didn't feel like work anymore.
Interesting.
I felt lighter. I felt freer. I suddenly felt more creative. And I went at my to-dos and my tasks with gusto because it wasn't about me anymore. It was about the service I was going to provide and the difference it was going to make for these other women. And so I remind myself now that when I'm feeling burdened or I'm feeling overwhelmed or stressed or fearful, I'm focusing on myself. And that by thinking about the bigger picture, like why I do what I do, what needs to happen, right? Do I have to do a presentation in front of people that I'm a little intimidated by? But why am I doing it? Why did I put myself in that situation? It alleviates the fear, the stress, and the burden.
That's a really fantastic way to look at things, because that can even be with your interpersonal communications and relationships as well as business, right? That's stuff that, so if you're a busy stay-at-home mom, or, you're involved in a lot of charitable endeavors and you're feeling like you're getting yourself just overtaxed and you have to wake up and do the same thing, whether it's business or any of these things, to stop and think about why you're doing it.
Yeah.
And what that end result means. So that could be, so Jody, how would that translate to something that is maybe not as immediately going to help another person, like a presentation? What if it's, what if your work is graphic design or something that's sort of intermediary? Same idea, same thought process?
Absolutely. All you have to do is tie the components of the work you're doing to the larger mission. Because I will guarantee you, if you're a graphic designer, you could easily look at a piece of work as the client wants this, I need to provide it. It's very transactional. It's very tactical. But if you look at your work, if the reason you got into graphic design was to be creative, to create art, right? To help people find self-expression. Because if you're a graphic designer, you are helping people to express themselves and their mission and their values. Like if you tie it to the bigger picture, then the work you're doing is no longer like a tactical to do. It's a piece of art.
Absolutely. That's a great analogy too about the creation. So this is really something that we can take with us wherever we're going, and whether it's business, whether it's home life, whether it's friendships, whether it's okay, yeah, sure, I'm gonna get on that hang glider and jump off the cliff. I suppose there's a bigger reason why you're doing that, but I really like that analogy. And what do you find when you're working with people, you're doing workshops or coaching? What do you find the greatest sources of fear are for women starting something new? Does there tend to be some commonalities on the types of things that they feel that make them fearful, or commonalities in the way that they're looking at it?
I can definitely tell you this. Women are more prone than men to feel like they have to have all their ducks in a row before they start taking action, right? I have to have the certifications. I have to have the letters. I have to have researched this. I have to know what the plan is. I have to know like who my team is going to be. I need to know all the components of what's going to happen before I get started. And you can find yourself in a researching and planning like spiral, like forever. And the crazy thing is because this is what happens. And, I apologize to anyone who's been planning and preparing for years, not taking action, because what's going to happen is when you start taking action, unexpected things are going to happen. Guaranteed. It doesn't even matter how well you plan, how well you research. I mean, the U.S. military is probably one of the best organizations for planning and preparing and training and all of that. And they will be the first ones to tell you, like, once the plan hits reality, it's going to change.
It's going to change.
Right? So it's not about, do some research, have an idea, know where you're going, know what your why is, your bigger mission, what you're trying to accomplish. But you can figure that out as you're taking action. You can start having meetings. You can start talking to people. You can start putting the plan in place. You can even test it out a little bit before, we talk about the soft launch versus the hard launch. You could do
Exactly.
a soft launch, kind of test it out and see what happens before you really ramp up and say, I'm doing this thing, or I'm in business, or I'm doing this event, or I'm taking on this initiative. Take action while you're doing the planning and preparing, and that will give you more insight into the direction you want to go and what's going to be most effective.
And do you think also going in with the mindset that you can't possibly control everything and it won't all be perfect? There's a saying, and I always screw up my sayings, but it's like perfect is the, what's that saying? Perfect is the
good is the enemy of great, or
perfect is, you try to make things so perfect that it just shuts you down.
Yes.
If there's not an analogy, there should be one. So somebody
I think
come up with it.
Perfect is the enemy of done. They played off the old that old quote. Yes.
Yeah. So, but I mean that the fact that we can't control every aspect of what's going to happen. So if we can go into it, even me with the podcasts, right? I mean, as I'm starting out, I was like, okay, I've got to get a microphone. I've got to do this, the technical part. And finally I just said, damn it, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I hope that wasn't a bad swear. And I'm trying not to have a potty mouth to all of you daughters of change out there. So you can call, well, maybe we might have to have a jar that I put money in. It goes to charity, but I'm going to try to be really good. Anyway, I digress. But that idea of taking that leap and realizing that you can't control everything, but it's okay because you're going to learn something that you hadn't even thought about in the process. So what do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I work with perfectionists and recovering perfectionists. And what happens to perfectionists is they become filled with self-doubt because they can never meet their own standards, right? If your standards are so high, you can never achieve them. What does that do to your self-image over time? You start to see yourself as, incapable, mediocre. And like for high performers and high achievers, mediocre is probably one of the worst insults.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You can
What are you talking about?
So, there is, you do want to take on this mindset that it's not going to be perfect. It's not meant to be perfect. It's meant to be a work in progress, right? Experiment. Like that's another mindset I help my clients take on. Like it's not about success or failure. It's about experimenting. And when you experiment, it's okay if things don't turn out the way you thought they would. What you do is you review what worked, what didn't work, where did it go wrong? Okay, let's revamp it, retry it, put it out there again, not like a perfect product, but as another experiment to see how it will land. So, taking on different mindsets around what it will mean if it doesn't work out exactly the way you planned it will make a difference between your being able to actually get something done or continue for another year thinking about getting something done.
So when you're coaching women, Jody, and I know because Jody coached me and got, and if you can coach me because like I am not a linear person, right? I mean, I'm digital all the way. I'm here, there, and everywhere. But you had some great insight for me. So when you're talking to people that you're coaching about focusing on the service or getting past the fear, are there particular exercises you have them work on? Are there particular conversations that you find are important to have? And also, what have been some of your biggest success stories without, you don't have to name names or anything, but I'm sure you have some great anecdotes of things that have happened around this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with fear, we first take it on, as like I have an assessment tool, an attitudinal assessment that I start my clients with. And this really gets at the heart of what's motivating them, what's driving them, and what's holding them back, right? We really get a clear picture of the mindset and what they're afraid of happening and how they're operating day to day that's keeping them from getting to where they want to be. Then we can do break it down, right? Where they will actually, I take them through a process where they identify where this is showing up in their life. And then we can have very specific conversations. For the most part, once they've taken the assessment and they've identified the areas in their life where they're experiencing fear or being held back,
right,
they sometimes diagnose themselves and come up with the solution all on their own. They just need me to be there.
Or right. to help them to recognize it, even though they know it's in there, but to recognize it, call it what it is.
Yeah. And just talk through it, right? Say it out loud, call it what it is. And then, someone really gets stuck there, then we start the whole, well, what's the worst that could happen? And is that so bad? And what would be the next worst thing that could happen? And would that be so bad? And what would you do ultimately if that happened? Sometimes it gets down to the very frightening thought that I'll be homeless on the streets. And my follow-up question is always, and how likely is it that would happen? And they go, that would never happen because I have family, I have friends, people would take care of me, right? So it's sometimes our worst fears. Now, I will say this, our worst fears are imaginated.
Yeah.
Let me repeat that. Our worst fears come from our imagination. We imagine them. They're not real, but they hold us back, right? And we can get into a whole nother conversation about the inner critic and how it works, how its job is to keep you safe. But this is a mechanism that is really, its job is to make sure you're safe. And its best strategy is to scare the bejesus out of you and make you afraid of what could happen so that you don't take action, you don't put yourself out there, you don't make yourself vulnerable and open yourself up to criticism and rejection and all of this stuff. And it uses your imagination against you, right? If I say this, then people won't like me anymore. If I do this, I will alienate people. If I try to, get a little too big for my britches, someone will come along and put me in my place. If I do a presentation, someone's going to call me out as a fraud, right? If any of that sounds familiar, that's your inner critic, right? None of that has happened.
Yeah.
Right. And I've done all those things and none of that has happened. It all turned out okay. But that's not to say it wasn't scary at the time.
At the time.
Right.
And do you find that is more common with women than men based on maybe the way we were raised or just sort of the way, and maybe not as much with the Gen Zers and the younger kids now, but just, is that a more common thing with women in terms of the inner critic and being as hard on themselves, or maybe the fact we've talked about, women don't promote themselves, right? A lot of times. So
I can definitely tell you, I can't speak for Generation Zers, although I have nieces in that generation, and they do have some of these tendencies. I don't know if it's a family thing or if it's just a women thing. I can tell you that the women, what I've noticed in women that you don't see as often in men, because I coach women and men, and I see this come up time and time again in women, whereas in men's profiles, it's not always there. It's one, the perfectionism we already talked about. Women tend to be more perfectionistic and have to have all their ducks in a row more than men do. Men are conditioned to take more risks. And to try things and to be okay with failure. And women are not. Women also have a greater tendency to people please. So what I'm going to do is going to upset somebody else or, take away. I've even had people say, well, if I become successful, it takes away from the other people around me. right?
Oh, wow.
Right?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
not just, I'm afraid to say this because, they might get offended or it might hurt their feelings. But women have also this thing like we should all be equal. Right. So I can only be successful if everyone around me is successful. So I'm going to make sure everyone else around me is successful first and achieve their dreams. And then I can have mine. Right. Because I need to lift everyone around me up before I can lift myself up.
The caretaker.
Yes. Which is typically the opposite is true. The more successful I am, the more I can help the people around me be successful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So it's interesting, because, having delved more into this myself as I've moved forward and gotten a little bit older, and hindsight's 2020, and then in working with you, it was, these things, it's not that they're surprising to you, it's that you don't really think about it and pull it out and talk about it. So, do women promote themselves, or are women, more people pleasers, or am I as a woman, as a person? It's one of those things that you just are doing it in your day-to-day life. And so when you find out that you're doing it, it's not like it's a big surprise, but you never really examine that you're doing it and pull it out and look at it. Does that make sense?
Yes. Oftentimes, well, let's just say it like it is. They call them blind spots for a reason.
Yeah, right. You can't. Don't want to see that. No sign.
Right? Like we go about our day. We're on autopilot. And actually, I just had an interaction with a colleague today, and it started with a voice message, turned into a conversation. But in the voice message, she said, I'm totally open to critical feedback. I have no problem with it. Yeah. I'd rather just hear, what's going on so then I can do something about it. Because if nobody tells me, I can't do anything about it. And I was like, and so people may find this a little crazy, but in my world, I was like, what a beautiful message.
Absolutely.
Right? To invite me to make a difference for her.
Yep.
Right? Ultimately, there wasn't a lot of critical feedback. We just needed to examine what was going on and the misperceptions and, all of that stuff. But I'm like, wow, what a way to go through the world to Absolutely. Say, I'm open to this, because the more you're open, and I'm not saying it's okay for people to trash on you. There's a difference between somebody verbally abusing you and somebody saying, hey, I really care about you and I can see something that's holding you back. Are you open to hearing it? Right? Like someone coming from that place and that intention. Right. That's what I'm talking about. If we could be open to hearing that, like that can make such a difference in our lives. And when I just did a workshop on goals about a month ago, when I gave the evaluation forms, I asked the women who were filling it out, don't think about me and whether or not this is going to hurt my feelings as you're filling this out. I need your critical feedback to make this better. So instead of thinking about me, I want you to think about the woman who's going to do this workshop next time and how could it be better for her?
Oh, perfect.
Right? And then all of a sudden, like I gave everyone permission to give me critical feedback. Because yes, like there's a lot of, and there's many, many more things that I could probably be doing better. But because I'm on autopilot and everything's just kind of working out, for me, I'm not examining those things too closely. Right? But what a gift it would be to have somebody say, there's something that's holding you back and you'd be more successful, I think, if you tried it this way. Are you willing to try it this way? Like, yes, I am.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's perfect. And then that's also for you to make what you're doing, your product, your services, whatever it is that you do, to make it better, to get feedback from the very people that are utilizing it. Mm-hmm. To find out what do they need, so if you can take those needs and match your offerings to meet those needs, mm-hmm. And if they're afraid to tell you, you're not going to know that.
Yes. Right? So. And I also want to add, Marie, too, and cut me off if I'm going off on this a little too much. Also, we can become more aware of some of the things that are holding you back. Like notice when you don't feel right about something you did or said, right? I was listening to somebody on a podcast who said, I decided not to take this board position for a women's organization because the chair of the board was a man, and that didn't sit right with me. So I declined. And she was asked, well, did you tell them? Did you give them that feedback? And she said, no. And in retrospect, she said, I didn't want to ruffle any feathers because I wasn't going to take the position anyway. She's like, but I'm sharing this with you because I didn't feel right about it.
Right.
So noticing like when you do or say something or don't do and don't say something, like how it sits with you, because that's valuable feedback around how you would rather have handled the situation.
That's actually a great story, because how many times do we do that in our day to day, where we don't speak up? And although I've been accused of being that person in the room that says what everybody else is thinking, even I do that. And yeah. I'm kind of a ballsy chick, and I will do that same thing, And so it's that's really interesting.
And you have to ask yourself, Marie, I'm going to just add this one more thing. Am I being strategic? Because I can see you filtering yourself a little bit strategically. Right?
Oh my God, I've grown up. If you're seeing me filtering myself, I do now.
Yeah, right? So there's being strategic, and then there's just not having the courage to say what needs to be said. So gut check yourself.
Okay, gut check. I love that. That is gut check. All right, ladies, gut check yourself. And gentlemen, if you're listening. And that does not make me feel and my gut is not uncomfortable with men listening to this, because you can be honorary daughters of change. Not to mention, I'm sure that you know and support and love women who are daughters of change. So Jody, as we come up on our half hour, there's a couple of things that I wanted to talk to you about. So one is, if you could offer up a piece of advice to all of those daughters of change out there that are listening in 2 to 3, you could have 4 or 5 sentences, whatever it takes. What is like the top piece of advice overall that you'd like to offer up about focusing on service and not fear when you're starting something new?
Yeah, I'm going to sum up what we've been talking about is that if there's been something you've been wanting to do and move forward on, and you're not because you're afraid, really recognize that is self-focused, right? And if you want to take action, if you want to make a difference, you really have to focus on the bigger picture and the people you want to impact. So really, your mind's going to imagine things anyway, right? So instead of letting your inner critic lead the way, why don't you lead the way and imagine the difference that you're going to make? Imagine the people, the men and the women whose lives are going to be changed because of what you want to do, even if it's something very simple, something very small. What difference is it going to make? Because very little things have a ripple effect. So get connected with why you want to do what you're doing and who is going to benefit from it. Because when you focus on them and you have a clear picture of who they are, it gets a lot easier. It's a lot less stressful. And you will, even if you feel fear, you will feel momentum, like this must be done. Some of the greatest things I've ever done have been done while I felt fearful, but had a bigger feeling in me of this has to happen.
Yeah. And case in point, this is my very first podcast. And I was, even for me, I was feeling a little something of that little fear nugget before. But, we started doing this and it feels natural, right?
Yeah.
So there you go. Case in point. So, Jody, also, I wanted to make sure that people know how they can find you, how to get in touch with you if they want to learn more about what you do, about your book. I know that you've got another book you've shared with me that you'll be writing in 2019.
Yeah.
But you certainly have already what you call a DIY book, right?
Mm-hmm.
You call it a do-it-yourself book. And that's the one that people can find on Amazon, and that is Accomplished: How to Go from Dreaming to Doing.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And now, do you also have that on your website, Jody, or is it easier for people to go right through Amazon for that?
Either, whichever they're more comfortable with. People tend to take action in the direction of what's easiest. So if they are a regular Amazon person, they could go there. But the other place that they can find me and all of my stuff, my hub is womentakingthelead.com, because there I've got the social buttons on my website. If there's a particular platform that you're active on and want to connect with me there, my podcast is on that website. My book is on that website. All the ways that you can connect with me are basically right there, and connect in the way that you feel most comfortable.
Perfect. So womentakingthelead.com. And that's women, WOMEN, takingthelead.com. And this is Jodi, JODI, Flynn, our fabulous guest, and have loved having Jodi as my first podcast guest, because the first podcast I was ever interviewed on was Jodi. So this just seems so appropriate, right? So we hope you'll tune back in. And as I'm signing things off, if you want more information about Daughters of Change, you can go to our website, daughtersofchange.com, and that's daughters with an S. And I'm going to take a note from what we learned today. If there's anything you'd like to be hearing on these podcasts as we move forward, anything you think that we can be doing better, I'd love to hear your feedback. You can also, and I'll give you an email address in a minute, you can also let me know if you know of a Daughter of Change that might make sense for me to be interviewing. Maybe it's you, maybe it's your sister, maybe it's a friend or a coworker. So again, that is daughtersofchange.com, and the email address is info, at daughtersofchange.com.